People like to say crime doesn't pay, but history tells a more complicated story. When you look at modern billionaire rankings, you see tech founders, hedge fund managers, and corporate executives. Yet there exists another list that is never published, a shadow list of criminals who controlled more money in a single year than most Fortune 500 companies ever generate. These were empires built entirely outside the law, protected by violence, corruption, or financial complexity, and hidden from taxation. To understand who the richest criminal in human history truly was, we have to look at verified historical estimates, government records, and investigative reporting, all adjusted for modern inflation. The blueprint begins in Prohibition-era America with Al Capone, the first man to treat organized crime like a corporation instead of a street operation. While other criminals robbed banks for quick cash, Capone realized the real money was in controlling supply chains, specifically illegal alcohol, and by organizing production, transportation, protection, and bribery, he effectively ran Chicago's underworld like a Fortune 500 company. In 1927, the U.S. Treasury estimated his annual income at $105 million, which equals roughly $1.5 to $1.6 billion per year in today's money. Despite his wealth and influence, Capone suffered from a fatal weakness. All of his money existed as physical cash, forcing him to hide it in walls and basements and spend recklessly because he couldn't safely clean or protect it, a flaw that eventually led to his downfall. Decades later, criminal wealth reached industrial scale with Pablo Escobar and the Medellin cartel during the 1980s cocaine boom. Escobar's operation was so large that money was no longer counted but weighed, with cartel revenues estimated at around $400 million per week at its peak. In 1989, Forbes magazine shocked the world by listing Escobar among the richest individuals alive, a moment when criminal wealth broke into public financial rankings. The scam created bizarre problems. Billions of dollars in cash were stored in warehouses and hidden rooms, and according to Escobar's brother and accountant, Roberto Escobar, roughly 10% of the cartel's cash was written off every year due to water damage, theft, or even rats eating the bills. Historical estimates place the total wealth controlled by the Medellin cartel at about $30 billion in the late 1980s, which translates to roughly $70 to $75 billion today. This wasn't money sitting in bank accounts, but wealth under direct control, buried, moved, spent, and defended. While Escobar lived loudly, another criminal understood that logistics mattered more than attention. Amado Carrillo Fuentes, known as the Lord of the Skies, revolutionized smuggling by controlling transportation itself, acquiring and operating commercial Boeing 727 jets to move massive shipments and taking a cut from nearly every cartel that relied on his network. Rather than estimating exact personal wealth, U.S. intelligence agencies believed his organization controlled and generated wealth in the tens of billions of dollars, much of it safer and better concealed than earlier drug empires, proving that infrastructure beats brute force. As law enforcement pressure increased on drug trafficking, criminal wealth evolved again, moving away from physical products and into financial systems. Semyon Mogilevich represents this evolution, combining organized crime with stock manipulation, energy trading, and complex shell companies spread across multiple countries. Investigators linked him to massive financial crimes, costing investors hundreds of millions of dollars. Yet his true wealth remains officially unknown because it is embedded in legitimate-looking structures that make it nearly impossible to trace. And unlike most on this list, he was never imprisoned. Finally, there is Bernie Madoff, whose crime involved no drugs, no guns, and no cartels, but trust. Madoff ran the largest Ponzi scheme in recorded history, fabricating decades of financial statements that showed a paper value of $64.8 billion when the scheme collapsed in 2008. This does not mean he stole that amount in cash, as the actual investor principal lost is estimated between $17 and $20 billion. But in terms of the scale of deception and fraudulent wealth created, no criminal operation has ever exceeded it. So who was the richest criminal in human history? By raw cash control, Pablo Escobar's cartel stands alone. By financial fraud scale, Bernie Madoff remains unmatched. And by historical influence, Al Capone built the model that all others followed. Yet every one of them shared the same fate, exposure. And the most powerful of all may be the one whose name never appears on any list, simply because they were never found.